Hello dear listeners, this is The Guardian's weekly news report about the most important things happening in the world with Aigerim Toleukhanova. Crimea referendum worthless as Falkland pause, says Argentina. The Argentinian President Cristina Fernandez, who has been campaigning for the Falkland Islands to become part of Argentina, said last week's referendum in Crimea was as worthless as a vote held last year over the British territory in South Atlantic. This referendum in Crimea is worthless, Fernandez said, speaking through an interpreter at a news conference with the French President François Hollande. Britain claims that Russia has broken international law and violated the territorial integrity of Ukraine by annexing Crimea. Residents of the Malvinas, as the Falklands are called in Spanish, voted almost anonymously to stay under British rule in a referendum in March 2014. MH370. Pilots and passengers innocent until we find otherwise, says Malaysia. The pilots, crew, and passengers of the missing Malaysia Airlines plane must be treated as innocent until proven otherwise, Malaysia Transport Minister has said. Police bundled relatives of Chinese passengers on flight MH370 out of briefing after they burst into the event into anger and unfurled a banner reading "Tell the Truth." One woman was dragged out as she was wailed, "Where are they?" at journalists. Flight MH370 vanished early on 8th of March en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing with 227 passengers and 12 crew on board. Malaysian officials have said they believe the plane was diverted deliberately, but say that they are not ruling out any possible reasons for the decision to turn it off out of force. England's lights would go out without Scotland's renewable energy. Scottish Energy Minister hits back after UK Energy Secretary claims independent Scotland would face higher energy bills. England's lights would go out without Scotland's large and growing supply of renewable energy, according to Scotland's Energy Minister. Fergus Ewing hit back after the UK Energy Secretary at Davy said independence for Scotland would force up energy bills for Scottish households. Israel is warned of being sucked into Syrian conflict after Golan bombings. Israeli Air Force jets bombed Syrian army position near the town Kenitra in the early hours of Wednesday, killing one soldier and wounding 7, as analysts warned of the danger of the country's armed forces being sucked further into its northern neighbors' conflict. During the 3 years of Syrian war, Israel has largely tried to avoid direct involvement, although it has periodically bombed targets it says are weapons shipments bound for the Lebanese Hezbollah movement, with whom Israel fought for a short and brutal war in 2006. Some Israeli military analysts has linked the bombing on the border to that they described as the growing confidence of the Lebanese group Hezbollah, the Assad regime's closest military ally in Syrian war, following a series of defeats by opposition forces in recent weeks. New York's dangerously old public infrastructures. An explosion in Harlem this week has brought renewed focus to the city, crumbling structures from gas mains to bridges. The explosion that killed at least 7 people in East Harlem neighborhood of New York this week has been attributed to gas leak. While investigators have yet to confirm that conclusion, it has brought new focus to New York's crumbling infrastructure. A gas main in the street outside is 127 years old. According to the report, 11% of the 162 bridges in New York City are more than 100 years old. The subway system stretches along 659 track miles. The first underground line of the subway opened on 27th of October in 1904, almost 35 years after the opening of the first elevated line in New York City. 15% of the city's 6,800 miles of water mains are over 100 years old. There have been more than 400 water main breaks in New York City in all but 1 year since 1998. In 2013, there were 403. These were all news for the day. Thank you for listening and see you next week.